I'm Elaine Viets. Like many little girls, Jennefer Carlynn Kronenberg wanted to be a ballerina. But Jennefer actually achieved her dream. She's a principal dancer with the Miami City Ballet. She also wrote a new book called So You Want to Be a Ballet Dancer. It's an insider's look at this competitive, beautiful, and heartbreaking world. I'm honored to talk to Jennefer on today's Dead End Job Shows. I'm Elaine Viets, and today I'm talking with ballet dancer and author Jennefer Carlynn Kronenberg about her new book, So You Want to Be a Ballet Dancer, on today's Dead End Job Show. Jennefer, we tend to think that ballet dancers come from rich, elite families. Was that your case?
No, it wasn't my case at all. Actually, I grew up in a very average middle-class family in a neighborhood in Queens called Kew Gardens, and I attended just my local ballet school called Once Upon a Time, and it was actually when I started in the basement of a building. It was one small studio, and they had very few students. It was maybe about 15 students total. And then later on, they moved to a slightly bigger place. They continue to be there now. But no, I was not from an elite family, and neither were any of the other students that were in the school with me.
Will you divide your life between before ballet and after ballet? Before you knew about it, what really happened to change your life and convince you that you wanted to be a ballet dancer?
It's funny, if I think about my life before ballet, there isn't much. I became interested in ballet at such a young age that I almost can't remember ballet not being a part of my life. I was dying to take lessons by the time I turned 7 years old. And my mother took me for the first time to the studio. And honestly, from that very first class, I think my life changed. I knew really, really from the get-go that this was something that I wanted to do forever. It's a very strange thing when I look back on it, having been so young and having that assuredness about what I wanted to become is sort of a rarity. And I feel really lucky, actually, that I was so sure about it.
Now, your mother took you to your first ballet class. What are the roles of parents in a young ballet dancer's life?
Parents are so influential. It's really up to them to be aware of their children's interests and desires, and make it happen if that's what they want. They're the ones that have to introduce it and bring them to the class and keep them inspired and keep them interested in it, even when it gets tough, because that's the difficult part. It's all sunshine and roses until you get a little bit older and the work really starts to get tough and the competition starts to get a little bit tough. And it's very easy to give up. Even though it's still in your heart and it's still a passion, it's still something that you want to do, there has to be that awareness, that you're in it because you love it. And the going, does get tough sometimes, and that's okay. That's going to be the case in anything that you pursue and want to do well. And it's up to the parents, I think, to maintain that child's interest and keep them, excited about it and encourage them to keep going with it if that's what they really feel their goal is at the end of the day. And just be supportive, really just be there when your child needs you and needs to talk or vent or needs that extra little bit of encouragement.
Well, I thought it was so funny when you were a little girl that thought you would wear a tutu to ballet class.
I did. That was a picture that I had in my mind because that's what I had always seen. When I would see ballet on television, everyone was in a tutu, so I couldn't imagine that you would practice in anything other than tutu. So I was a little bit in shock when I got to the studio and everyone was in their leotard and tights.
And you were in a red leotard, out of uniform?
I was completely out of uniform in a red leotard, which was my favorite, and I had to go and get a black one, and it wasn't a happy time for me when I had to change out of that red leotard.
Um, what should parents look for in a beginning ballet class? Should you go to a famous school? Should you go to a neighborhood school? What is an important way to start a young ballet dancer's career?
You know what school you go to, or you know, if it's big or small, famous or not, is really up to the individual parent, or you know, the needs and interests of the child, how serious they are. You know, every school out there focuses a little bit differently on the different genres. You know, some will be much more ballet oriented than others. You know, some will be jazz oriented. So, you know, it's up to the parents to sort of decide which would be the best road to take for their child. But I think no matter what, the main thing is for the parents to really be comfortable with the teacher and the method. Really go in there and watch a few classes with your child and make sure that she's comfortable in the environment and you're comfortable with the teaching style of the studio. You know, that everything is safe, that there's ample space, that the floors are safe, that they're sprung. Just basically that it's a safe, healthy learning environment for your child.
What is a sprung floor for those of us not familiar with dancing?
We dance on special floors. We call them sprung because they have a couple of different layers underneath the linoleum, or sometimes it will even be wood, to make the floor, it'll have a little bit of a bounce so that we don't hurt ourselves when we jump. It's very shock absorbent. It's almost like, well, it's softer, but it's almost akin to a basketball floor, a gymnasium floor that has that extra give in it so the athletes don't hurt their joints when they jump.
Now, in your preteen and teen years, ballet dancers go through a lot of changes in their bodies, like everyone that age.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of career decisions do they have to make at that time?
You know, that's the hardest time that a dancer has to go through, I think, because your body does change so much at a certain age. And just because it's changing, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it's going to stay. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. You know, there's a time in our lives where we all gain a few extra pounds. You know, we become rounder, we become more womanly. You know, your breasts start to form, and that's not necessarily the ideal epitome, you know, of a ballerina's image. And we do have to look at ourselves in the mirror all day long. And we are competitive, and we are comparing ourselves to everyone else in the class, and not everyone is maturing at the same rate. So it's very difficult. But you just need to remember that it's a step that everyone goes through in life, whether you're a dancer or not. And this may not be where your body ends up. It will change again. It may not. And that's where you need to say, you know, is this something that I want to pursue? Maybe talk to your teacher and see, you know, do I have really what it takes to go the extra mile and become a professional, if that's what you want? And believe it or not, we're so lucky to live in the United States of America, where there are so many different ballet companies and dance companies that even if you don't have the picture perfect ballerina body, you can get a job somewhere and you can dance. You know, it's not like in other countries, in Russia, for example, or China, where they go and pick the children when they're 6 years old and you only get to dance if you're absolutely perfect. That's not how it is here, and we should be very thankful for that and not give up on ourselves. Remember that if this is something that you want to do, you can do it. It doesn't matter if you're perfect or not.
Well, it's interesting how many that you talked about dancing styles. When someone says ballerina, you immediately think of Swan Lake. But
Mm-hmm.
you talked about the Balanchine style, Twyla Tharp, about developing versatility.
Versatility is so important, especially nowadays, and especially if, you know, for those of us who don't have the perfect facility, who maybe want to get into these other companies, you need to be ready to adapt to different styles. And believe it or not, that's what's going to set you apart in an audition, is whether you can pick up choreography quickly, pick up the movement styles quickly. And we've gone so far beyond the traditional classical ballet, Swan Lake sort of movements. We're now into such different contemporary style of movement that we need to start opening our minds to that and being able and ready and just make ourselves accessible to that.
Well, when it comes to ballet shoes, I had no idea the dancers went through so many shoes. What was it, 30 pairs a month? Um,
It's a crazy amount of shoes. We at the Miami City Ballet, it's not quite 30 pair. We get on an average rehearsal week, we'll get between 2 and 4 pairs to use
wow.
for rehearsals, and we have to make them last. That's our responsibility to harden them with some crazy glue or jet glue. There are all kinds of different things that you can harden them with, and we'll have to wear them and reuse them. When it comes to performance, it's a different story, and a ballerina can easily go through between 1 and 3 pairs of shoes during each performance. These shoes are very, very expensive. Luckily, when you're in a company, we don't have to pay for them. The company takes care of it. But for students, it's a little bit difficult. It becomes the parent's responsibility to keep the child stocked in their shoes. And it's a huge responsibility because if you don't have the right shoes, you can't dance, and you can easily get injured if the shoes are too soft. So it is an expense.
Well, I enjoyed reading the things that you did to preserve your shoes, including putting them in the oven.
Yeah, that was a big mistake.
Do not do that at home, right?
Do not try that at home. No, that was a friend of mine had told me to try that, to pour some shellac inside and bake them in the oven at 350 degrees. And she neglected to tell me that you only preheat the oven and then turn it off. So I stuck my shoes in there with the oven on, and it was a disaster. You can only imagine.
Well, the other thing I didn't realize is that ballerinas sew on their own ribbons and elastic, and that's part of the support of the shoe.
Yes, it makes all the difference in the world. And, so many people actually ask me why they don't come with the ribbons and elastics pre-sewn. And it's because every dancer has their own preference of where they need the most support. And just, a quarter of an inch difference, either front or back or up or down, will change the way the shoe supports the foot. So it's very individual, and we all have to learn how to sew them on properly so that they stay put, they don't open up when we're going through our point work. It's a big job. It's very time consuming. It's actually what I hate most about the profession. But we have to do it.
Well, the other thing was, I think this is something people don't consider with ballet, is when you switch from ballet slippers to point shoes, that's an important decision, and it doesn't happen at the same time for everyone.
No, it doesn't, and it's a very important decision. At this point, we rely very heavily on our teacher's judgment. It's so important that a child be strong enough and that their ankles and feet are ready to support the weight of the point work. The little bones in our feet and the joints and tendons are so delicate and fragile. If we're not strong enough, we haven't had the proper preparation, it's so easy to get injured. So it's not about, I've turned 12, I've turned 13, now I'm getting my point shoes. It has nothing to do with that at all. It really has to do with how strong we are and how technically ready and capable we are before we get those point shoes.
Now, dancers are artists, but they're also athletes. And this seems to be particularly difficult for male dancers, where dancing is often seen as a career for girls. Mm-hmm. When you talked about the need for strong male dancers.
We are in such need of strong male dancers. Honestly, we ballerinas are nothing without the strong men that are behind us. They're the ones that keep us on balance. They're the ones that lift us. We don't have a complete ballet without them. This is definitely not a profession just for girls. The boys are so very important. And they have to be manly. They have to be men. We're the ballerinas. We wear the tutus. They are the princes, and the two go hand in hand. You can't, you can dance solo, but there's something incomplete about it. The story is not complete.
Well, you talked about how you